Welcome to Biztech's APAC Cybersecurity Show. Now, today we've got a guest from a company which is very well known in the cybersecurity space. It is Vishak Raman. He is Fortinet's Vice President for Sales in India, Southeast Asia, and Australia, New Zealand. Now, Vishak, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian. Great to get connected here.
Now, Vishak, for a start, cybersecurity has evolved over the last 20 years. You've seen the changes. How can you walk us through very quickly how the industry has evolved since you started till today?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, cybersecurity is a very dynamic field, right? And I'm thrilled by the dynamicity what it produces. Every 6 months, it changes its color, the nature of attacks, and the defense mechanisms as well change. So it's a very dynamic, constant, ever-learning field to be in. And one is the advancement of technology and the way in which customers have adopted their digital infrastructure to accelerate. So digital acceleration and cybersecurity goes hand in hand. They are inseparable. You can't accelerate your digital initiatives without cybersecurity. And it's kind of having a better brakes to drive faster on your digital acceleration. That's how I see cybersecurity per se. And we've seen from very targeted, very heap and spray kind of attacks towards state-sponsored, very well advanced, technically advanced, focused attacks emerging in the last decade or so. So to me, the industry has changed a lot in terms of adopting cybersecurity from a point product towards to a larger platform-based approach. And that evolution is something which I've seen in the last 2.5 decades.
Now, I want to now zoom in on 2024. What are the key challenges facing IC security teams, as you mentioned, to take care of these very focused attacks, state-sponsored, and of course, it's organized crime. It's all very structured right now.
Yeah, see, APAC as a region is going through rapid digitalization, and the way the increased attack surface and complexity is quite high. And the main threats today the business is being faced is ransomware is the first big one. And what we saw in the first half of 2023 is 13x surge in the ransomware detection. And what we interestingly saw in the second half of 2023 in our FortiGuard Labs threat research is 70% drop in terms of volume of attacks. That means while you have detections going higher in the first half, and when we see the volumes drop by 70%, that means ransomware is focused on high value targets. It's no more heap and spray, right? And second big trend, what we see is the rise of advanced persistent threats. These are targeted groups which are well funded. Example like Lazarus, APT28, APT29, the Kimosky group. These groups actually carry out mass campaigns in the APAC infrastructure. And what we saw in our FortiGuard Labs threat research is 27% of identified APT groups are still active. That means what we saw as the groups identified over a period of time, they're still persistent and they're still going after high value targets. So ransomware is the first one, followed by advanced persistent threats. And we also saw interesting trend of IoT exploits. That means the way in which IT and OT is converging and your attack surface actually expands when you converge your IT and OT. Because today, CEOs want to have predictive maintenance of the shop floor.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know their predictive maintenance schedule. They want to know the production capacity. So they're constantly asking CIOs and CISOs to, hey, give me today's production setup, just like what you give me on your IT setup. So today they are being forced to make this convergence of IT and OT because business is asking for a business update. And that comes only by having an integrated approach to your IoT setup, which used to be like a separate operational technology environment. So this convergence of IT and OT is actually expanded the attack surface. And today we saw a great amount of activity, whether it's ransomware, whether it is remote access trojans, or whether it is the latest agent Tesla, or whether it is the JavaScript Cryanox, where we saw IoT being a targeted attack because it helps the malware or the ransomware to move laterally by entering into the IoT setup, right? And the other important trend, what we see is faster exploitation of vulnerabilities. Exploits occur, right? There are vulnerabilities which is found, but how quickly people are getting onto those vulnerabilities and then creating exploit kits. We saw a rise of about 43% in the first half of 2023 compared to the earlier years. So people are exploiting those vulnerabilities ever than before. So it's accelerated exploitation of vulnerabilities, and people are also reusing the old vulnerabilities. Some of the vulnerabilities are 15 years old, but still it is unpatched. So
I see. That's interesting. I mean, these are quick wins internally that could be done if they were aware of that, right? So why hasn't it been done? You said 15 years. That seems illogical to me.
Yeah, but again, we have a IoT setup which has never been patched because it was never connected to the internet. They thought who's going to come and access. But
Right.
what happens is, there is a USB connectivity back to a IoT setup, and the USB goes back, stealing all the data information back, and then you do a maintenance of these PLC schedules, right? So they are interconnected. So OT setup is not working in isolation, right? And what we found in the dark web is 20 significant zero-day vulnerabilities as well. That means you have the old vulnerabilities which are unpatched for legacy devices, and then you have newer vulnerabilities found. And what we saw was the dark web activity is significantly improved. And there we saw 20 significant zero-day vulnerabilities shared and close to about 850,000 payment cards advertised for sale. That means there is plethora of old vulnerabilities which needs to be patched, and there are newer vulnerabilities that are getting published, and your information is all out across. So to me, the rise of these threats are due to ransomware, advanced persistent threats, what we call it as the three-letter acronym APTs, IoT exploits, faster exploitation of vulnerabilities, and reuse of vulnerabilities, and the dark web has actually thrived is e-commerce activity in terms of selling customers' data in a huge, humongous way, because that's a very profitable business per se. And the last and most important, the lack of collaboration and lack of transparency within the cybersecurity vendors, right? You need to collaborate, share threat intelligence, publish your vulnerabilities by self-declaring it, and your rate in which you need to do your quality assurance of your security products, and then publish your vulnerabilities in terms of transparently. It needs to actually go up much, much higher. So I think, and plus the industry collaboration. How do vendor A and vendor B collaborate in a customer environment which is in a heterogeneous way, right? To sum it up, it's ransomware, it's IoT exploits, it's APT, reuse of old vulnerabilities, dark web activities, and the way in which lack of collaboration and transparency. This sums it up all, why the cybersecurity threats are looming at large today.
Okay, then, given that scenario, so you've painted this picture of this expanding organized threat. So that's the attackers. Now, on the regulatory framework standpoint, how is the regulatory landscape evolving? Because we've had updates to Singapore Cybersecurity Act, and let's look in the region. Singapore Cybersecurity Act, Malaysia is coming up with the new cybersecurity bill as well. Is our governments and the overall regulatory framework keeping pace with all these developments in cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think they're going to play an important role in terms of enhancing. And let's talk about the Singapore Cybersecurity Act, which got passed on May 7th, right? What they've expanded, and the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, CSA, has actually, sort of expanded its, authority, which extends to any critical computer system to the national interest, including the temporary systems which comes in for, let's say, a vaccine distribution, or whether it's a high-profile international summits. Those are being treated as critical infrastructure. And it's very heartening to see the way in which these amendments have included newer entities. For example, the amended Act of Singapore actually includes newer entities like autonomous universities. Today, they play a critical role in protecting a critical infrastructure. And plus, they made the mandatory reporting of critical infrastructure. They must declare outages. They must declare on attacks, those affecting their supply chains. And the expanded realm of influence is to third party as well, right? And the inclusion of new class regulated entities, where they've added 2 new classes of entities, which are entities for special cybersecurity interest and foundational digital infrastructure, which will include the subject of critical infrastructure at a wider scope, right? So, and plus, if you really look at it, the critical infrastructure owners who don't comply with newer regulations can face criminal and civil penalties as such. So, the law is tightening it up in terms of broader inclusion of entities and strengthening the way in which the reporting and collaboration needs to emphasize, right? And same goes with Malaysia standards. When you really look at the Malaysian standards, we see the strengthening of National Cybersecurity Committee, the NACSA, and where today they're augmenting, understood that the shortage of cybersecurity professionals is the big problem in Malaysia, right? And this is something which they've expanded the critical infrastructure across 11 sectors, right? So I think the government is doing its best to make the laws and purviews spread across. But again, the tools and techniques is what the customer needs to use is something which is their choice. So the law can do its part, but the frameworks, what people need to adopt if you're running a critical infrastructure. Today, a bank and a telecom is a critical infrastructure. A downtime in a bank's ATM affects the country's economy, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the law will actually keep expanding it, add more categories to it, but the tools and techniques, what these agencies, these critical infrastructure needs to use, has to follow through a larger framework, whether it is an NIST framework, whether it's a government-led guidelines, whether it is a technology-driven like MITRE ATT&CK framework, whereby your infrastructure is actually protected or not across all of these phases of attacks. So to me, laws will keep expanding their circle of influence, but how do you adopt and deploy remains with the critical infrastructure owners.
Now, so we've talked about the attackers, what they're doing, and how complex it is. We've talked then about the regulatory framework. Now I want to zoom in literally on really the defensive measures. How do we protect ourselves? And you talked about just a few seconds ago around the critical challenge. Use Malaysia as a specific example, but that's a global phenomena. Really, the shortage of talent in cybersecurity. How critical is that from a defensive posture, and how is AI then helping and enhancing the ability of companies to deal with this talent crunch and obviously enhancing threat detection on a defensive basis?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting topic. If you look at it, by 2026, we're going to have roughly about 2 million jobs unfulfilled in cybersecurity, because there is lack of talent, lack of shortage. And advancement in AI is actually helping better threat detection and talent crunch. So if you look at it, AI algorithms analyze a very vast data sets in a real-time basis. Okay, and it helps to look at accurate detection of potential threats. That means where AI automates your observation of your system logs, your network traffic, identifying anomalies that can actually sort of indicate any breach in advance. So it helps you from a predictive threat intelligence point of view, because its ability to analyze a large amount of data sets on a real-time basis. And second, AI leverage predictive analytics to use historical data as well. What has happened? What is your normal traffic? In a bank, we know this is the last day of invoicing or a payroll, the activity goes much higher. Or if it is, let's say a Chinese New Year, then your credit card transaction goes much higher. So your ability to really baseline an attacker traffic versus a normal spike in your business traffic, AI can handle that past historical track it very well. And at Fortinet, we have about 54 plus cybersecurity products, and 40 of them are already AI powered. And we make sure that we include algorithms which are context aware and looks at offering a larger targeted remediation in terms of guidance, whereby your level 2 and level 3 SOC security operations, heavy lifting of looking at these large data with the big screens out there can be simplified with AI adoption, whereby your shortage in your L1 and L2, level 1 and level 2 of your security operations can be used effectively in your AI tools. Level 3 of applying a counter mechanism has to be with the human effort, right? So AI is going to play a very active role in terms of intelligent monitoring, in terms of how you respond to security breaches, and the way you're going to apply at scale if you have a very large enterprise, right? So AI is going to play a very important role in threat detection and solving your talent crunch, which is doing this repetitive, mundane task of analyzing data.
Now, Vishak, if I was, this is mid-2024 right now. What should CISOs be watching out for in the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, so if I look at it, first and foremost, you need to have a comprehensive way in which you invest in advanced detection technologies. You can protect what you can detect, and you need to detect what is detectable first, right? So you got to invest in advanced detection technique like your endpoint detection or your XDRs. In terms of looking at your network monitoring, you are looking at your capabilities to strengthen your security posture across your security operations. You need to enhance your security tools and systems. And last and most important is implement automation and orchestration. It means how you automate your security operations center, right? Whereby you reduce your need for more manpower and look at bringing in replicability, where you detect once, protect everywhere. How can you enhance your automation and orchestration capability? And the other piece is proactive training and preparation. Any amount of tools and techniques with an end user who is poorly trained can actually sort of open up more vulnerabilities. So Fortinet's end user training resulted in actually 84% of reduction of risk. So one is strengthening the human firewall. And also look at leveraging your managed security service providers. That means you outsource your security to your managed security service partner who has the expertise, who has round the clock of monitoring, and who has wealth of information about your global threat intelligence, right? Because attacks are no more local. Attacks are global, right? So managing your threat intelligence and leveraging your managed security services partners will be a very important part in looking at global scale. What is happening if my bank is attacked today? What is happening in my peer group? Because hackers will go after the common verticals, right? And increasing your capability in terms of collaboration and information sharing. Security is a team sport. And you need to collaborate with your vendors, with security agencies, and establishing a strong partnership in terms of sharing threat intelligence and best practices. So to sum it up, I would say invest in advanced detection technologies. Look at integrating your security tools, and automation and orchestration is an important part. Prepare your end user, your human firewalls, strengthen them. Look at threats from a global point of view, leverage your managed security service partners, and bring in better collaboration within the vertical what you operate. Essentially, you need to reduce your time to detect, time to remediate, and bring in the level of automation, whereby your remediation can be automated far more effectively. And I think this would help the security practitioners to strengthen their security posture.
Vishak, it's been a fascinating conversation. On that note, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Thank you, Brian. Lovely connecting with you. Hope it was useful.
Now, we've been speaking to Vishak Raman. He's Fortinet's Vice President of Sales for India, Southeast Asia, and Australia, New Zealand. I'm Brian Fernandez, and you've been watching and listening to Biztech's APAC Cybersecurity Show. This interview will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.